Hello, everybody. Welcome to 321 No Kiddin'. Bobbie the Awesome here. And today I am joined by an author, a gambler. Uh, well, I shouldn't identify anybody as that. I apologize, Christa. That was not good. Someone who can relate to us in the gambling arena. But welcome, Christa Okon, to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm excited to hear more about your story, about your book, about everything that's going on. But how about just giving the audience a little feel for who you are, a little introduction to kick us off?
All right. Well, let me tell you that I was born in Germany in 1947, and our family moved to Canada when I was 9. Then I had to learn how to speak English, how to read English, and then when I was 12, we moved to the United States. And my life has been so exciting because I ended up moving frequently. I've moved over 30 times in my life. I also believe in doing what you're most passionate about, which got me into law at some point, and then later got me into buying a sailboat and learning to sail and taking off for the Caribbean. But I discovered that I was a really lousy diesel mechanic. And that's really part of, if you're going to be a solo sailor, you really need to have that part down. And I did not. I mean, I just didn't want to get my nails dirty. So, I mean, I had to just give up the dream of being this sailor, you know. But there have been so many aspects to my life that have just been absolutely wonderful.
I love that. Um, Being a sailor is brave, and what I like about just your brief recap, it sounds like you're a woman after my own heart, like living life to be alive. Like that's what I call it. Going after, trying, even if you weren't a diesel mechanic indefinitely, at least trying and experiencing things.
Listen, I even had to bleed the injectors on the engine.
Oh my.
And I mean, that was it was quite the adventure for me in every imaginable way.
You said 30 moves. Was that like what prompted that, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, to begin with, we had been living in Germany and my dad was already in Canada. So the first move was from Germany to Canada. So then my mother really hated being there because we were in British Columbia and it was us kids, we loved it. It was so beautiful, so wild. It was a wilderness. But my mother thought she had died and gone to hell, because it wasn't, she was a big city girl from Cologne, and this was really a little tiny nothing town, a little fishing village. So, then they took us to the United States. And then my dad, who had been trained to be a chef in Germany, he then turned into a building superintendent. And as he mastered each building, as he mastered the air conditioning, plumbing, and heating system of each building, his boss kept moving him to ever grander buildings. So we went from the Bronx in 60 to Brooklyn. No, we went first to Queens, then to Long Island, then we went to Brooklyn, then we went to Manhattan. So we ended up in downtown New York in 4 years. So all of these different moves in 4 years. Right. So I had like 10 schools by the time I graduated from high school.
Wow.
And then I met and married a man whom the army immediately snagged and carried off. So now I'm following him across the country. So, from New England to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to Texas, and then we ended up in Pennsylvania. And if that wasn't enough, I then hooked up with people who wanted to move and travel, and we did that. So I mean, it was just a constant moving until 1985 when I arrived in Santa Fe by my own choice. The first time I made a choice as to where I wanted to live.
Mm.
And I have been basically here ever since, except for when I absconded with the boat.
I love it. Love it. Well, part of why you're on 321 is to share a little bit about your experience with gambling. And you said some beautiful things to me before we started. And by beautiful, I mean true, not beautiful that you felt that way, but beautiful, true. So, um, if you don't mind, take us on a little journey. I related so much to the boardwalk part. I remember being in color guard on like a trip and going to the boardwalk in New Jersey, and I lost all the money my parents gave me to go travel on the boardwalk. So that really struck a chord with me. I actually hadn't thought about it in years. Um, But do you mind sharing a little about that
No,
experience?
I'd love to. I would love to tell you what happened. When I was the summer I turned 15, I worked for a family in Rockaway Beach. And I was a mother's helper, and the family had 3 little girls. And so I spent my entire day with the girls, getting them up, feeding them, dressing them, bathing them, taking them to the beach, playing with them, keeping suntan lotion on them, taking them back for naps. It was very, very labor intensive, and it was probably, 100 hours a week of work, for which I got paid $10 a week. Now, back in 1963, $10 was a lot of money. I had taken the job so that I could buy myself school outfits when school started again. So I had anticipated coming out of the summer with like $100, which I would have been able to buy myself like 10 outfits, including the shirts and the blouses and the skirts and the dresses and the underwear even, right? I mean, back in the day, you could really buy something with a $10 bill, but nowadays you can't even get a bag of groceries anymore, right?
Right.
So, okay, so I worked really, really hard that first week. It was exhausting, and then I had my $10 in hand, and I had never had that much money at one time. It was a lot of money for me. And 2 miles down the boardwalk, there was this gambling venue, and I just everything looked so easy and so inviting. You toss the ring over the top of the milk bottle, or you spin the wheel, or you use the dart to try to get the balloon. I mean, they were like, 50, 60 different things that you could do. And I thought, I have 100 chances to win, and I intend to win. But now, the very first time that I gambled, I felt this surge of excitement go through me that I had never felt before, and it was so strong, I could not stop. I was unable to stop. So at the end of it was about 2 hours, and I'm walking back to the cottage with no money, not a dime. And I'm feeling really devastated. How could this have happened? I don't understand this. I don't understand how I was not able to control myself, right? And I'm thinking that this is not going to happen again. However, next Sunday, I'm back again. I am doing the same exact thing. 2 hours later, I walk back again with tears. This happened 4 times in a row. And the last time it happened, I was so down on myself. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't have any kind of support with it. But I just felt something is so wrong with me that this is happening, and it's happening repeatedly. I must be so stupid to get myself into the same bind time after time after time. And now 4 weeks have passed. I've lost 40% of the money that I intended to use for my outfits. And I said, you will never do this again. You will never do this again. And then for the next 30 years, I didn't. I just stopped. I terrified myself so badly, right? Okay, so 30 years goes by. I'm living in New Mexico. There are no gambling establishments here, except for some uh what is it that these old people do?
Bingo.
Bingo. There we go. Bingo. And bingo is so boring. I mean, it is so tedious. Under the end, I mean, you have to like wait half an hour to find out you lost, right? Who has time for that? Who has time for this, right? So, I mean, I was never interested in bingo. So one day my friend says to me, look what I found. And she takes us to this, it was a single wide mobile home that Tsuki had set up its first gambling venue. And in the little mobile home, there were like 30 one-armed bandits. And then I said to her, I can't do this. And she said, don't be ridiculous. It's my money here. Take a five and, uh, and I didn't listen to myself. Okay. I didn't listen to myself. I had forgotten how terrifying the experience of that loss of control was. I had completely forgotten that. So I took her $5 bill, put it in the slot machine, and you know what? Immediately these endorphins went flying through me like, oh, this is so wonderful. This is so wonderful. Well, I went back twice more with her, and then the next time I didn't need anybody to go with me in search of Lady Luck. I could do it all by myself. And that's how I started getting into a really, really, really bad habit. And because I was an independent contractor at the time, a paralegal, my time was pretty much my own. I didn't have to be any place at any given time, and I usually had cash in my pocket. And the cash, it was like little island shavings, and the casino was the magnet. The moment I had like $20 in my pocket, I thought, hey, I could parlay this into 100 or 200 or, and up the road I went. It was like 10 miles up the road from where I worked. And I would get there, and some days Lady Luck would smile on me, and then I would stay until it was all gone again. But it just got so horrible for me that I tried all of these ploys to protect myself, and none of them worked. So I started by leaving my credit cards at home, because I realized that I would talk myself into, the machine will hit at any moment now. I can go and get another $40 or another $100 out, because it's bound to hit. I mean, it hasn't hit the last hour, but now it's going to, because look at the cycles of the. You talk yourself into reasons why it's a good idea to do more of this that's devastating you. So I started with the cards. I mean, and then the cash. I left the cash at home. Then I left my checkbook at home. I used to write checks, even though I didn't have the money in the. And this is a bad thing for a lawyer. Well, I was not a lawyer then. I was a paralegal then, but I knew that this is called check kiting, and you should not be doing this. But so I could get $300 with my check, and then hurry up and hope that one of your clients will pay you in time to get that money. I really had the good fortune, Bobbie, of never having a check bounce. So in that way, I was always lucky, right? Because I worked my buns off to make sure that that money got into the bank before the check arrived, because it would always take like 3 days in those. At that time, it would take 3 days from the time you wrote the check. So I knew that, right? I'd be safe.
Can I jump in with something? Because
Sure.
So you're right. You knew that was kiting. It wasn't until many, many years in Gamblers Anonymous, one of the questions to self-identify as problem gambler is something like, have you ever broken the law? And I don't know that people, like, I know I didn't for many years. I'm like, no, I never broke the law to sustain my gambling habit. But writing those checks, I mean, the world's different. I don't even own a checkbook anymore, but yeah, it's not indicative of who we are generally as people. We don't go out to break the law and steal, but essentially we're kind of stealing from the bank or whatever. So I just, for the audience, more than anything, I wanted to jump into that a little. So
yeah, that was definitely an illegal thing, and fortunately for me, as I said, none of the checks ever bounced. But Bobbie, as far as I was concerned, in the final analysis, what upset me the most was not the loss of time, not the loss of the money, but my integrity. Okay, because I started to lie to people.
yeah.
If I would try to protect myself by making luncheon engagements, because I care so much about people that I always thought that will draw me away by noon. I will not be here all day in this casino, because I care enough about these people to keep my appointments with them. And then it got to a place where I just couldn't pull myself away from the machine, because I was so convinced. And I've put $500 into this machine. It's got to hit. It's got to hit, right? Then I would come up with these excuses. I would say, oh my gosh, I had this problem with my car. I couldn't get a hold of you before the cell phone came along, right? I wasn't able to contact you to let you know. So my integrity started to really go downhill. And I felt that. And I was borrowing from absolutely everyone. And I was always really good about paying everybody back really quickly. But it was getting to be a nasty habit, you know, that I would use money that should have gone to the phone bill, or money that should have gone to something else, while I was in the casino, telling myself it's going to be okay, because I'm going to win, and it's going to hit, and it didn't, and it doesn't. Even if it hits, then you're back the very next day trying your luck again, right?
Yeah.
Because a win is even more incitement to go back.
Just keeps us playing longer, though. Doesn't actually give us money for the bills ever.
No, the house wins in the long run, always, and we know that. Everybody knows that.
So I can relate. Oh my God, I can relate to so much of this. But so how did you get out of this cycle? Like what was the next stage in your gambling career? What made you stop?
It was 2004, and I had gotten to this crucial place in law school. I was in law school, and it really, really hit me that if I didn't stop this habit, it would destroy my career. It would just completely snatch away all of my dreams. And it was such a clear realization at that point that I decided I had to do something about it. I could not continue because I was in law school, which was very arduous to begin with. I was a much older student. I was already 56. And so my ability to absorb the information was not as quick as when I was younger. But then I had 18 years of being a paralegal under my belt by then. So I had all of the knowledge of what a lawyer does. And it was at that point that the New Mexico had a hotline for problem gamblers. And so I called the hotline. They put me in touch with Elizabeth Sterling. She's a psychologist in Santa Fe. And she was amazing. She was so amazing and so wonderful. And she said, look, you're not a ham. We're not going to cure you. What we want to do is we want to change the behavior that's devastating your life. But she went really into my background, and the first time I had in-depth analysis was with her. And so I saw at the time that I had the analysis that I had a lot of grievances that I was kind of nurturing and rehearsing and going on about, a lot of areas where I had not dealt with or forgiven the proponent of the discomfort, right? So yeah, when you have this and you're carrying it around with you, it's an opportunity to really screw up your life badly. If you're not willing to look at the hurts and how they came about, and then really realize that with every one of those, there was a blessing. You don't really get to the place where you can travel through life without carrying all that baggage. So it's really important. It was important for me to realize, first of all, that I was carrying all this stuff with me, and then to get rid of it, to shed it, to process it.
Mhm.
And this particular psychologist used EMDR, which is a technique where they use a sound. It's called a hemisync technique, where one sound goes into one ear and just a slightly different wavelength comes into the other ear. And then the brain tries to synthesize that. And while it's busy trying to do that, your ideas go right into the subconscious. You can pass the conscious gatekeeper. And so I was able to replace a lot of my resentment with things that felt healing and beautiful. I just changed the endings of stories.
Wow.
Yes, it was an amazing form of therapy, and I highly recommend it for anybody that has a lot of emotional baggage that they're carrying around with them. It was really a beautiful form of therapy.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, so I'm gonna have to do a little homework. It sounds pretty interesting. Um, One of my big takeaways, well, there's two, because I was gonna ask you if you ever came to discover, because one of my beliefs is that we gamble usually because we're escaping or there's unreconciled issues. So thank you for sharing that, and validating my hypothesis on that. And then you were 56. I'm 48 right now. My niece is 18. And I always use her as a benchmark. And I have all this, it's almost a little bit envy. It's like she knows so many things, like the self-awareness and the healing and all the things. She might not have executed them all perfectly yet, right? But she at least knows about all that stuff. And I really felt robbed that it took me until going through these programs, and robbed isn't the right word, because I'm grateful for how it all played out. But I also am like, damn, who would I be? Where would I be if I learned this stuff when I was 18 instead of in my 40s, only through recovery? And then my next thought is, what about all these people who didn't go through addiction to go to recovery? That's when the grateful lens comes on. Like, okay, well, at least I had the opportunity and I know now. So that's kind of like my lens on what you said. So I love that you said you started at 56, and I could see you have thoughts brewing. So go ahead. I'll shut up now.
I was going to say that whatever has happened to you and the timeline in which it happened is really instrumental in having made you the person you are today. So I would not look back with regret that you didn't learn something sooner, or maybe you didn't have a better teacher, because all of the steps that you went through and the time in which you went through them gave you this profound desire to affect other people's lives. Now, if you had come by your knowledge much earlier when you were much younger, it may have gone this quickly for you, right? And then you wouldn't have been left with this desire, what can I do to help other people? But you having gone through it when you did and to the degree that you have was really, really important and creating this entire dynamic. So it's a blessing for you.
I can accept that. It's just one of those
You
things that it's interesting to ponder.
you wished you had been blessed sooner, is what you're saying, basically.
Well, maybe yes and maybe no, because I get it. And I wouldn't have had the experiences. Like I've always said, since my like version of waking up, that if the reason I went through, an uncle killing himself on a holiday week, or a father that abandoned us, or blah, 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 like, right, like all the things, was so that now when I am of service, I can relate to different people, even my own spiritual journey, right? Like I was like a declared atheist. I don't want to talk about religion. If God existed, my life wouldn't suck so bad. How could you even believe this? But now to someone who, has this profound faith that I just didn't even have a decade ago. So I think that it is all part of who makes, I agree with you. It just took me a while to get there.
You really, really need to read my chapter 13, Bobbie. It's called The Awakening, An Unwelcome Past Life Surfaces. I went to the dentist as an atheist, a new dentist, and a friend said, try his nitrous oxide. It's really going to calm you. I was so terrified of dental work, so I did. And the nitrous oxide opened up this profound spiritual experience for me, starting with letting me see the body as pure energy. By the time I came out of my dental treatment that day, I was no longer an atheist.
Wow.
Yes, I mean, and then I had sequels to that. Every time I went back, every time I had the nitrous, it was like these doors to perception opened. And I saw myself in other lifetimes. I saw other people. I saw things about the world being formed. It was just amazing, absolutely amazing. But then I heard about this other life that I had lived that I did not want to know about.
Mm.
And it took me a little while then I just pushed it far away. I thought, no, that can't be. That just cannot be. I can't deal with this. No, 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 no. And it took me until I was close to 60 before I really explored that and came to terms with it. And that's sort of the title of my book, From Nazi to Empath, coming to terms with other lives, past lives. Some people would say they're simultaneous lives. That's the quantum theory. And I am not intelligent enough, I don't think, to understand Einstein's particular delving into the minutiae of that. But it says that we know all of these lifetimes, and we have thousands of them. It's hard to believe, but we have thousands of them because it takes that many to smooth out all of our rough edges. And we come with lots of rough edges. We come with lots of judgment. We come with hostility. We come with poor me. We come with all of these different things that it really takes time to work through to become a better self, a more enlightened self.
I'm glad you opened the door on this, because this is a topic I can remember for years, like when people talked about reincarnation or past lives, there was always like this at the end of the sentence, if you believe that stuff. Um, and I was like, what are they talking about? I was just never in, I just wasn't dialed in enough to even really understand the premise. And now it's starting to show up where people are talking about it and I'm listening a little better, and people are having experiences. Do you want to elaborate a little bit about reincarnation? Like, how did you how are you so sure, or like, or if someone is curious about this, maybe how they explore? You want to talk about any or all of that?
I will start with going back to the nitrous experiences that I had. I did not believe in reincarnation when I went under the first time, and I fought the teachings. I fought it. I did not want to know. And probably because on a deeper level, I really knew already, right? I did not want this to come to conscious awareness. I did not want to have to deal with this. So I'm under the nitrous oxide, and I am told, and this is mental telepathy, I never saw anybody, you made a mistake. And the mistake was in connection with a life in Nazi Germany. And then I was also shown a slice of Hitler's life when he was a teenager. And he was so devoted to his mother who was dying of breast cancer. And I thought, why am I being, I was completely freaked out about seeing this. Okay, why am I being shown Hitler? You know, whether he's nice or whether he's not nice didn't matter. Just the idea that's, you know, my higher self thought that this was instrumental for teaching me, but it was so upsetting to me. And then I thought, is this even true? Is anything that I saw 70 years after the event of his mother dying, I'm seeing the tenderness, the devotion, the love, the caring. And then it takes me another like 30 years. I come upon this book written by a childhood friend of Hitler's, exactly describing the scene I saw. Right?
Wow.
So, I mean, it was what I saw was actually something that had happened, but I didn't understand, why am I being shown this? And then you made a mistake being told this. And I really didn't want to know anything about this, but it was affecting my life, even though I didn't know consciously. For example, I'm a senior in high school in New York City. I'm supposed to be going on the stage of Julia Richmond's high school to get an art award. I was the art editor of our high school magazine, and we were being rehearsed to do this. And I was so completely, I couldn't. I was terrified of the idea of stepping onto the stage by myself or with anybody else. All these eyes upon me. It was a huge school. It took up the entire city block from 1st to 2nd Avenue, from 67 to 68th Street, an enormous school, a huge auditorium. But I had no idea why I felt so terrified at the prospect of stepping up on the stage. I just couldn't do it. And I told the people rehearsing us, I can't be here. My parents are taking me to Hawaii. And it was a complete lie. It was an absolute lie. But I had to get myself out of this predicament, right? And here Fritz, this other self, he spent the last year of his life in a courtroom with all these eyes on him. And then he got hung. He was Hitler's plenipotentiary of labor. And in that capacity, he brought millions of people into Germany to put them to work in factories, because the German men who had been running the factories were all dead on the battlefields. Right? So in order to keep Germany going longer, Fritz in his capacity dragged all these people into Germany to make everything work longer. And in doing that, he was indirectly responsible for keeping the war machine that was killing people in Poland in huge quantities going, which he claimed he didn't know about, okay, in his trial. But again, you know, here I am, I'm a student, and I am not understanding, why am I having these feelings? A year before that, I was in a school in Brooklyn in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. The school was 95% Jewish, even though it was a public New York school. And while I was being enrolled in the school, the lady in admissions, I asked, may I take a class in German? I was trying to keep my German alive because we didn't speak it at home anymore. And she said, German is a very unpopular language in this school. We do not offer it. And it should have been a clue to my father. This would not be a good place for me. But it, you know, he didn't pick up on it. And so I spent 6 months in a horrible, horrible place for me, because I'm blonde, I'm blue-eyed, I have a German accent, and I was treated like Hitler's emissary. And I was Hitler's emissary in a sense, right? I mean, they were able to pick up some of my energy that I wasn't even aware of. So it was a horrible experience, but one that was necessary in the context of karma. because I had participated in the course of events that made Jewish high school students in Germany feel unwelcomed and hated. And so then I was being treated to a taste of that, right? So that was just pushing through without my knowing what it was.
What's coming to me as you're talking, Christa, first of all, I can't even imagine, right? Like, I was in the minority at high school, but it was nothing as drastic as that. And it was uncomfortable. So I can't even wrap my head around how you must have felt during that time. Another recovery theory or philosophy that I'm really starting to believe in is that I've always been, up until lately, I've been very black and white. If I quit gambling and I'm working on my recovery, you should be able to too, right? Very judgmental, very shitty, very shitty. And where I'm at now is, like, I always thought it was a fault or a responsibility thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But
Totally.
what I feel like now is it's still our responsibility, but it's not our fault anymore. And by that, what I'm saying is, when you tell a story like that and you're gambling as a little girl at 15, you're running away from stuff that you don't even know happened because it didn't happen in this lifetime. So it shouldn't be about blame and judgment, right? It shouldn't be who I call her my addictude, Bobbie, the one that acts like an addict and has all those yucky characteristics. But you're really demonstrating it through your story, that the triggers weren't here and now. And for you to go through it and to be able to evaluate it and then tie it into such like real situations like high school and this getting on the stage, it's just very profound to me. And I appreciate you kind of tying it all up together for me.
What's even more fun, I mean, the thing about the high school wasn't so much fun, but years later, when I was trying to run away from the casinos, one of the things that I decided to do is I would physically remove myself from New Mexico to a place that didn't have casinos, okay? So then I'm laying in my bed at night, I'm thinking, what could you do instead that you would enjoy? So I'm thinking of moving back to Pennsylvania, where I lived 10 years, or New York, where I lived 10 years. And I'm thinking about maybe San Francisco, I could be a paralegal anywhere. And suddenly I'm getting this picture of buying a sailboat and sailing. And I cannot tell you where that came from because I'm living in landlocked New Mexico at this time. There isn't enough water to sail a teacup, let alone a sailboat. It's all man-made lakes here. And I was so excited by the idea of doing this that I said, yes, yes. So I sold my little piece of land and I moved down to Florida, where my sister was dying of her alcoholism, which I couldn't understand. I bought myself a boat, I learned how to sail it, and I found that when I was out on the Gulf sailing, I was as excited with as many endorphins as ever I was in a casino. And it was so much healthier because I'm out in the sun with the wind blowing the boat around. I'm having to physically maneuver things. It was just wonderful. I didn't know that this guy Fritz, he had been a merchant marine and his primary passion was sailing. I didn't know that. So he's pushing through, right? He's just pushing through. And I was an instant sailor, thanks to him,
Wow.
right? And then I tried to do it again 20 some odd years later. I thought this was so much fun. Why don't I just buy a boat and live on it and sail all over the world with it? And I really started to do that until I realized what a lousy mechanic I was.
That's crazy. That makes me very curious now, a whole new level of curiosity. Someone has told me that I was a man many more times than I was a woman, which I believe. I've said that my whole life. Like, I should have been born a guy. I have a guy name. I have male tendencies. So I could appreciate that. But it'll be interesting to kind of play around and pay attention to what is showing up and why, because there's certain things I'm definitely drawn to and others that I'm repelled to. So this is, you got my thinking cap on.
The thing to really look out for, Bobbie, and this is for your audience as well, when you're suddenly seized by something which is so, 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 unusual for you. Let's say you're walking down the street, you're passing a music shop, and you see a violin in the window, and you have never played a violin. You have never had any aspirations to play one, right? And suddenly you're seized with this urge to go in and buy that sucker, and you've got to learn how to play it. And this is another self of yours taking over. All right. I went to a piano store. I wanted to get an electronic keyboard for $1,000. They were all out of electronic keyboards. And the young man in the store said, "Would you like for me to play this piano over here for a concert grand?" It was enormous. And he sat down and he started to play Boogie Woogie. And I mean, it was so amazing. I thought, oh my God, I have to have this piano. So I went into the store to buy a keyboard. I came out with a $14,000 piano. And then I thought, okay, you need to take lessons and really get good at using this. And I found out within 6 months of lessons that I have no aptitude for playing the piano. But there's a concert pianist stuck in me someplace. I don't know who it is, probably Rachmaninoff or somebody wonderful, because it was listening to Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 that got me so excited about playing the piano. But those are all indications that another self of yours is taking predominance and taking over some of your aspirations and pushing you and pulling you.
That's interesting. So what compelled you, Christa? So you have this book and it takes people through the journey, just like our conversation, but in much more detail. Like, why write a book and why now? And like what what's in your heart to do this?
It started off as kind of a nudge about 10 years ago, I would say. I wanted to share with the world the experience of learning about incarnations, because once you have seen yourself, if you're white and you've seen yourself in a black life, you lose all of that these people are different from me somehow, right? Because you've seen yourself as one of them, right? So it's no longer them versus us. It's now all of us together. So I wanted people to realize we have lived so many times, and we have lived male lives, we have lived female lives, all of this stuff about homosexuality and people getting upset about gender. I mean, it's just useless, wasteful energy because of the fact that we keep coming back again and again and again, and we keep changing so that we get to experience all of it. You know, if you weren't born into the body you want this time, life is really short. It goes this fast.
Yeah.
It's almost like a dream, okay? And you will come back in another body, but we select these bodies before we come in for a reason. And I think maybe we forget what the reason was, right? We forget that we make agreements with people before we're born. I will be here for you in your old age. For example, this happened with my mother. When my dad died, I was so ready to just take wing and take off after him. And I asked, my higher self, can I do this? May I leave now? And I was told no, because you have this agreement to take care of your mother. And I thought, well, my sister is alive. She lives 7 miles away from my mother. I live 600 miles away, and she doesn't even like me. Why me? And then my sister dies of alcohol. And that's the other interesting thing. You're talking about you want everybody to be on the same wavelength, everybody to be fighting their addictions, everybody to be, standing in their light. And when you have an addiction and somebody else has a different kind of addiction, I found it impossible to understand how my sister could keep on drinking to the point of completely oblivious. Her mind was like reduced so much by all the drinking she did, and then her body was completely incapacitated. And I was so furious with her when she died. I went out on my little boat out into the Gulf where nobody could hear me, and I screamed at her, and I'm bawling, and I'm like, why didn't you do it? Getting all of that out of me because I could not really understand how you could be so enamored of alcohol that you stupefy yourself day after day. It's just a different form of addiction, but it's so hard to understand another person's addiction. I couldn't even understand my own.
Right.
I didn't know why. And I never found the root cause of why am I interested in gambling and other people are interested in drugs. or some of, they're interested in sex, or some of, I mean, you name it, and there's an addiction for it, right? And if it's not your particular addiction, it's really hard to understand how the other people are getting so excited about it.
Yeah, it's true. The substance abuse ones, like, I could relate to based on the people around me. And I think you share this quality of this being responsible to ourselves and quality, right? Like that's how I feel like I got to the other side of gambling, or I never ended up in jail or whatever, because there was always like I showed up for work and I did the things. But I could see the damage of alcohol and drugs around me. So I had made a choice. I don't want that. I still ended up drinking way too much, and I'm sober now intentionally, um because I don't it's not in alignment with who I am anymore, which is crazy because I loved drinking, and even when I went to rehab, they're like, "Are you going for gambling or for drinking?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So maybe that's a little bit of a problem, but it does, being in this arena and getting to talk to so many guests with so many experiences, it's definitely shifting my compassion level. Because yeah, we may not ever know what it's like to be in their shoes. Um, but the escapism, the consequences, the pain, like it's all real and it's all the same, whatever the thing is, whether it's identified or not. So that's why I've just had to take on grace, love, and compassion. Like that's it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I mean, oftentimes people will say gambling is one of the hardest addictions because it's not as easy to see, right? I mean, there's no glazed eyes, there's no slurred speech, you're not falling down,
Yep.
right? It's harder, it's easier to hide it. And if you live alone, it's really easy to hide it. Nobody sees you coming home in tears at 2 o'clock in the morning, dead broke again, worrying about how you're going to cover this, your insurance for the car, which is due tomorrow, and the checks that you wrote, which are coming due in a couple of days, right?
Yeah. So, well, again, I don't know if I got distracted, but why share now? Like why share now with the book?
Okay, so there's a couple of different things here. One of them is I just felt it's an interesting story and it's entertaining to begin with. The other thing is we are experiencing more anti-Semitism right now in the world. And I really want to draw people's attention to the law of attraction at this point. I want you to realize that what we focus on, we get more of, and that's the way the law of attraction works. So I wanted people to become more conscious of what they're actually thinking about in terms of seeing the other person as being the other again. We really need to come to terms with the fact that we have been and we have done all of it. There is no innocent babe among us, even the newborn. I mean, they have had as many lives as everybody else,
Right?
and they've come in with their own karma to deal with. And I would just like for us to learn to do more healing and loving and less blame and less judgment. Uh, we're at such a critical juncture politically in this country right now. And at times I look at the extreme right wingers and I see myself in them because that's where Fritz was. He felt like he was saving Germany, right, from the Bolsheviks, which was the Russians. He really felt like he was doing his part to keep Germany from completely collapsing and becoming a Russian satellite. And the right wingers among us feel like they're fighting really hard to keep some modicum of what they think of as the ideal country going. So we're all coming at it from maybe a good place, a desire to perpetuate something we treasure. But in doing it, we're creating enemies and we're creating opposition and we're creating judgment. And needs to stop. It needs to stop. We're all in this together. We live in this amazing country, so blessed with so much. And for us to be spending half of all of our earnings on armaments and hateful things on the planet is awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I wrote it now, because we're coming to a critical juncture and I want people to become more aware.
Thank you. That's beautiful. All right, Krista, is there anything that we didn't dive into? And I have to say, for all these topics, I think you and I did a great job of making this flow and get to talk about so many wonderful things today. So thank you for being an amazing guest. I appreciate you for that.
You are so welcome, and thank you for inviting me. I hope this goes out to lots and lots of people and that they will want to take a look at my book. It's actually on Kindle Unlimited. It's actually free on Kindle Unlimited. And it's also soft cover, hardcover, and an ebook. I would love to hear back from people who read it and have a good experience with it. And hopefully, if I can just touch one other little life and help them along, it will all have been worthwhile.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Krista. I learned a lot. You opened my eyes, and I'm going to have to reflect. And, um, that's kind of the fun of this game is getting to meet wonderful people like you and learn and be a little bit, crack my mind open just a little bit more. So, thank you for that.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.